In Seattle, there are 10,000 calls to Seattle police for assaults every year. There are 10,000 calls to Seattle police about burglaries every year. There are 12,000 calls about domestic violence every year. In recent months, a difficult job has become almost impossible. And in recent months, we've seen things on our streets that in a different time would have been hard to fathom. A man with a gun taking a bigger gun away from someone who'd stolen it from a police cruiser that had been set on fire, like a bad cowboy movie. A man taking a full swing with a baseball bat to the head of a police officer. In the charging documents for 19-year-old Jacob Greenberg, a friend texted to him, "Very proud of you." Greenberg texted back, "Appreciate it. I'm proud too. He. Wish he didn't have a helmet on. LOL. A crazed man with a flaming pole running towards a police car and driving the pole into the window of the car. The car burned. The officer escaped barely, but he easily could have been killed. People trying to cement shut the back door of the East Precinct and then lighting the front of the building on fire in hopes of trapping police inside to die. And peaceful protests about police violence taken over at night by those deliberately provoking police violence. When Seattle needed leadership the most, the city council, far from being a calming agent, threw gasoline on the fire.
I've also spent more than 15 years thinking that this is something that we could reform, that we didn't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But I am now convinced that that is not the course of action we need to take.
It is the institution of policing itself that must be dismantled.
Now is the time to divest from a police department.
City Attorney Pete Holmes announced that he wouldn't file charges against protesters, even when they were arrested for things like obstruction, failure to disperse, and property damage. For the most part, he kept his word. It was a green light.
It is becoming a very hostile place for the police in Seattle, and they see that, experience that, and feel that, of course, on the streets. But I think the most challenging thing for them is that they see that many of those signals are also coming from our elected officials.
About what's going on in Seattle, there's this thing called the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. What's your thought on that? The fact that the protesters have taken that over and not allowing people to come and go freely? Regarding the Capitol Guard.
Well, that's news to me, so I'll have to reserve any comment about it. I have not heard anything about that from any credible source. Not that you're not credible. It's just like before I espouse an opinion, I should know of which I speak.
It's almost hard to fathom now, like some kind of twisted urban legend, but it really did happen. The city of Seattle really did surrender a police precinct and 6 blocks of businesses and homes to a mob. Seattle walked away, abandoned the rule of law, abandoned the people that lived there and worked there, quit on them.
Leaving the precinct was not my decision.
America looked on, confused.
Any criminal knows they can come in here, do anything short of life-threatening, and get away with it.
Defiantly, infamously, Seattle smirked and doubled down.
How long do you think Seattle in those few blocks looks like this?
I don't know. We could have the summer of love.
Well, tell that to the police who was supposed to be in that precinct.
The summer of love went to hell.
Before that, city council members showed up at the barricade on June 6th during an intense week of clashes between protesters and police to celebrate this really cool thing that was happening. Dan Strauss, Lisa Herbold, Andrew Lewis, and Teresa Mosqueda showed up and took a selfie. 2 days later, police boarded up their precinct and walked away. But there were real people in that place, not just the ones drawing with chalk and blowing bubbles, but people running businesses, people afraid for their lives.
I didn't see a police one. I mean, I'm pretty shook up.
Then the guns started showing up, and when the sun went down, a meanness crept in, and hell started breaking loose.
Step back if you are not part of security!
Now there were guards, self-appointed peacekeepers, and every night, terror.
Medics, they're calling for medics up there.
It was a City Hall-sanctioned, real-life, Lord of the Flies scenario. Kids find themselves in the wrong places at the wrong times. For Lorenzo Anderson, a 19-year-old special needs kid who was at CHOP in the early morning hours of June 20th, it was a death sentence.
No police. When do Seattle, Tacoma, any place in America don't have no police that's coming? That's who we count on. That's who we look up to. No matter what's going on, they do some up shit, but at the end of the day, them are the first people that we need to call to de-escalate something happening.
Surveillance video showed an 18-year-old pull a gun out of his pocket and pointed at Lorenzo. Lorenzo tried running away but fell down and was shot repeatedly.
What's going on? Put your guns down!
And here's the thing. When police responded, they were met by what they called an aggressive and volatile crowd. They couldn't clear the area. First responders couldn't or wouldn't go inside the CHOP zone to get to the body. Lorenzo lay there bleeding.
But when they signed oath, they knew everything could have been a hostile environment from get-go. You being playing hero, play hero for him. He needed them. I needed them. I am torn apart behind son. You understand this? I'm torn.
Somebody finally drove him to the hospital, where he died, just one day after he graduated from an alternative high school. Lorenzo's mother, Donita Sinclair, is represented by Mark Lindquist and the Herman Law Group. She is suing Seattle for creating and allowing a dangerous situation and for failing to protect and medically assist her son.
What have they said to you?
I haven't heard from them.
You haven't heard from...
Never!
From the city of Seattle?
This the best man got going. Never heard from them.
Where was Seattle that night and that month? Where were the people who were charged with protecting a city and its citizens? Where were the adults on June 20th when a chunk of Seattle was abandoned and so was a 19-year-old kid bleeding on the ground? In 8 days, there were 5 shootings in the CHOP area, with 6 victims. There was a rape and various assaults and beatings and buildings set on fire. On June 29th, a 16-year-old boy named Antonio Mays Jr. was shot and killed.
2 African-American men dead at a place where they claim to be working for Black Lives Matter, but they're gone. They're dead now. And we've had multiple other incidents: assaults, rape, robbery, and shootings. And so I can tell you that I think enough is enough. I absolutely do.
And so the police, who had been ordered to surrender their precinct, were ordered to take it back. It took a couple kids' lives and untold amounts of suffering to remember what our leaders should have known all along, that in the real world there have to be rules and boundaries and laws, or else people die.
Nearly 2 days after demonstrators took over an area outside the Seattle Police Department's East Precinct, dubbing it an autonomous zone, you claimed not to know about it. Despite it being the subject of nonstop local and national news coverage, despite it trending nationwide on Twitter, what should voters make of the fact that you were apparently oblivious to police abandoning an entire precinct in the state's largest city? You have 1 minute, 15 seconds.
Yeah, well, listen, if you look at the facts of that situation, I could not have been oblivious to it because I actually deployed the Washington State National Guard.